One of the defining moments for me is that he looked me in the eyes and grabbed my hand and said, "Emily, you have to keep going," because he knew that that is what was working.
It's time to consider cannabis. I'm your host, Curtis. This is the 18th episode of Consider Cannabis. And this week, we will be talking cannabis with our guest, Emilie Ramach, the founder and CEO of Compassionate Alternatives. Compassionate Alternatives is a 501c3 nonprofit that helps those who cannot afford medical cannabis. We're going to hear from Emilie how the nonprofit got started, what ignited the passion behind it all, how you can help, and how you can ask for help if you're in need. We're going to cover all that and much more because Emilie is not only the founder and CEO of Compassionate Alternatives, she is also a general manager at Terrasana Cannabis Company, which was just given approval by the state of Ohio to open 3 more dispensaries in Columbus, Fremont, and Garfield Heights, bringing the total number of operational dispensaries in Ohio to 12. But right now, we are going into the lobby of Terrasana's Columbus location, which, if you are listening to this on release day, is opening for business tomorrow, March 26th. Now, there's going to be a little echo in here, but don't let that distract you from getting to know this genuinely compassionate human being, Emilie Ramach. Now, without further ado, let's sit down with Emilie and consider cannabis together. So, Emilie, tell me about your first experience with cannabis.
I was a junior in high school, and I actually had a boyfriend that I was dating at the time, and I was really struggling with math, and our math classes were actually right after lunch at that time, and so he had been smoking, quote, weed for like a good 2 years or so prior to that. You know, this is high school, so everyone's just kind of probably experimenting in their own way, but he had actually introduced me to that in high school, and I remember we smoked the very first time, smoked at his house. No one was home. It was during our lunch break, because at the time we were allowed to go home and have lunch at home and then come back. So we came back to school. I went to math, and it was the first time I was able to like really concentrate and be able to understand like the math and like geometry and just stuff that we were doing at the time. And so for me, like just right off the bat, I was just like, holy crap, this is really helpful just like in helping my attention and being able to focus and concentrate on this.
It just unlocked the things
It kind of did. Like I really don't have, a lot of experiences that, a lot of people generally kind of talk about like, oh, we had this huge party and I smoked it there or whatever. Like my first experience was more or less kind of like an intimate experience. Just I was at home or at my boyfriend's house, whatever. And he said, well, maybe you should try this to see if this will help you with math. And it totally did. And from there on out, we went home and basically smoked weed before going to math class. I ended up getting one of my best grades in math that year. That was junior year of high school.
What were your parents' views on cannabis at the time?
So that is very interesting. My parents at the time, we never had a conversation about it, ever.
Never at all?
Never, ever, ever, because looking back, if you grew up in the 90s, we had the DARE program, which was huge at that time. Mm-hmm. So, of course, it was very anti-marijuana, all drugs, but at the time I remember them specifically being anti-marijuana. So really, it was kind of terrifying, as a child in high school because you don't know, if it's necessarily okay or not okay, and you kind of have more or less this inner struggle of I felt like it was helping me concentrate, but then you had all this kind of negativity kind of coming in from programs like DARE, different stories and stuff in the news. It just kind of held that kind of negative stigma. And so, yeah, my parents and I, we never really had that conversation until I was around 24 is when we had our first conversation about it. Well after, yeah.
Do you remember feeling like you'd been lied to?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Especially afterwards, too, like, because I would smoke. Then I was just like, okay, well, if I can smoke this and concentrate, like, what's all, like, the fun about, Do we just, like, sit around and we can just all get super, super high? And then I kind of learned, like, the fun parts of it, going to the parties and smoking and, especially, like, well into college where we would have, I was never a big partier in college at all. We basically in our college dorm set up Halo tournaments, and all of us would smoke weed and literally eat Swedish fish or order pizza, and we would play Halo until 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and that was like our weekend, and like we would look forward to that. And it was just like I just was into like video games and stuff like that. We always just were big smokers and not necessarily into like beer and just going out and partying and stuff like that. So I never really had that kind of like crazy college experience. It was more so me just kind of diving more and more into like the recreational side of marijuana.
That's very interesting to me that you were using it for more of like a attention deficit treatment, and then started partying with it in college. Continue that journey. Where'd you go next?
So basically I ended up just with my group of friends, and we all were just kind of, the stoners. People would call us like, oh, you guys are the stoner group. If you guys want weed, go to the stoner group or whatever. And so my best friend at the time, he was part of that stoner group. So he was my best friend all through college, all through like early adulthood. And he got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when he was like 22. And so at the time he was living in Brooklyn, New York, and he had great health insurance, a great job, and we were super young. So I was immediately, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can to help my best friend. So I looked into like anti-alkaline diets, like sugar-free diets, and just really put my heart and soul into diving into this research. And through that research, I came across the Rick Simpson oil. And at the time, this is going back, 10 plus years. And so there really wasn't a lot of data to suggest that the Rick Simpson oil wasn't going to do as much that people now know. Like the studies have come out now, now it's like, okay, yes, this does cure cancer. But at that time, there were a couple random studies about it. And because I was young and I wanted to help my friends specifically and doing everything I possibly could, I actually got a hold of Rick Simpson oil, and he started taking this Rick Simpson oil multiple times a day. And after about 2 weeks, the doctors did another scan and found out that his tumors were shrinking. His appetite was increasing. He was having more energy. He was able to go to work and kind of travel because he did a lot of traveling for his job also. And then after a month, they were shrinking even more. He had more energy. He actually traveled to New Mexico during that time, and just more and more was just feeling better, feeling healthier. And so after I think it was about 2 months of him doing the treatment and just feeling amazing, the tumors were shrinking, the doctors started catching on and becoming very suspicious about what he was doing. And at the time, it was a felony in New York to have any kind of marijuana on you at all. And so him and I had a very long conversation about it and kind of unilaterally decided that we should stop the treatment because he was afraid of losing his job and, just everything that he had worked for up until that point, to be thrown in jail for something that was a felony at that time. So he stopped the treatment, and within 6 months, his tumors came back with a vengeance, and he ended up passing away. And actually, the day before he passed away, I went and I visited him at hospice, and this is like one of the defining moments for me, is that he looked me in the eyes and grabbed my hand and said, "Emily, you have to keep going," because he knew that that is what was working for him. The next day, they moved him home, and he passed away that night. And literally the next week, I dove into legislation, and basically, because I knew what had happened with my friend, I saw it, him healing, and the Rick Simpson oil was actually healing him. I saw firsthand. And so, looking back, I kind of say that we were young, dumb, and passionate, because we had a whole group. We had no idea. Knew nothing about legislation and how to work with government officials or anything. We just said, this is silly. Like, this is a plant. It obviously is helping people. And then even after my friend died, the more I just continued research, and the more and more I found was so many people with very similar stories, such as, my friends. People out in California were having great success with it. Were being cured of stage 4 cancers. And, at the time too, they're having good success with like epilepsy and neurological disorders and stuff like that also. And so, I dove into legislation. Through legislation, I met a woman that had actually graduated from Oaksterdam University, which is the brick and mortar school that's out in Oakland, California. And they've been a school, since I think they opened like in the mid-90s. They've been a purely cannabis-focused education school since the 90s. And so she and I ended up moving out to Colorado. At that time, too, I just wanted to know everything I possibly could. So we moved out there. I worked at a cultivation center out there. I learned how to cultivate and grow the plant. I learned how to process, make edibles and tinctures. And then I also ran a dispensary out in Colorado as well. And because my entire family was back here, we ended up moving back here after 4 years of being in Colorado. And to kind of continue my work, I've been a medical marijuana patient consultant in Michigan and in Ohio, so more or less just helping patients and families who really want to use cannabis as an alternative to like chemotherapy or any kind of pharmaceutical medication. I really kind of helped them navigate that process. And more or less, I sent a lot of families out to Colorado and California just because they wanted that additional option to be able to treat their child that has cancer, or epilepsy, or whoever their loved one was that was kind of suffering from those diseases.
For my own slowness,
Yeah.
outside of college, your friend was diagnosed with cancer.
So he graduated college, so he was diagnosed like maybe a year or two after we graduated college. Yeah.
Okay. How long was the total time but when you started sending him Rick Simpson oil to the point when he decided he needed to stop?
He was diagnosed. And so at the time, too, I didn't really know how serious it was, because normally when people find out they have pancreatic cancer, it's already stage 4. Because to my knowledge, there really isn't a lot of testing prior to really say that you have any kind of stage 1, stage 2 pancreatic cancer. Like normally when people find out, to my knowledge, is usually when it's stage 4. And so, my buddy didn't really tell me or tell anyone in our group like how serious it was. He just said, I have pancreatic cancer, like, we'll take care of it. We'll go through the thing. Because that was just like his general kind of view and attitude towards life anyway. It's like, whatever, it's just a hurdle. We'll get through it. And so that was actually a year before we started like the Rick Simpson oil and stuff like that.
Okay.
So he had gotten diagnosed. He was still pretty healthy. They had him go through a round of chemo. And after that round of chemo is when I specifically was like, I saw it, like just how sick he was getting just from that first round. And, that's when I dove into like my deeper research.
It's hard for me to wrap my mind around making the decision to stop treatment when you know it's working and you know your tumors are shrinking. It's hard.
Right.
It's
we were young and, at the time his career was taken off and, it was really difficult. To this day, I still kind of carry a lot of guilt about that because obviously, us as humans, we can't control what other people do at all.
No.
And so, I could have talked to him till he was blue in the face to try to convince him. And I've even talked with other patients too since then to try and convince them that this treatment's working, that you should continue with it. And everyone has their own self-will. And if they're for it, they're for it. They make their own decisions for their bodies. And just one of the reasons that I did jump into medical cannabis, because after that moment that we had when he was in hospice the day before he died, just that eye connection that we had, that point made it okay. He was telling me, keep going. We knew it worked. It was almost like it wasn't said, but it was said. I know that was working. You need to keep going to be able to help others. So that's what catapulted me into this and this amazing industry. Yeah, so basically I jumped into legislation, I would say about a month after he passed away, because obviously we had the grieving period and all that too, whenever you lose a loved one. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to experience to this day. I would say, it was at least a month. I started researching just different groups that were already kind of in the process of passing something or like at least trying to get something passed medically here. And so there are a lot of different groups. And the one group, we just kind of jived and I liked what they were doing. And just from there, I became really close with my mentor, the woman that really worked with me. And then from then on, that just kind of continued my journey into medical cannabis. So going to Colorado and...
So it's been a year that you've been in this nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you tell us about the inception of Compassionate Alternatives?
Yes, absolutely. So through my journey of working with patients and being a marijuana consultant for these patients, I really got to learn about them and work with them on a personal level and really learn that so many of these patients that have like these chronic lifelong debilitating diseases, they're on disability. Many of them are, it's chronic. And so their medical bills have just piled up. So many of these families were already so crippled by their medical debt that the thought of having to pay out of pocket to be able to have access to medical cannabis was so far out of reach for so many different people. And so really that was my main passion for starting Compassion Alternatives, was to be able to, find a way to cover that cost, to be able to at least alleviate that burden from their life. They already have so many other things going on. They're sick. They have, medical bills and just the general stresses of life. If I could at least, create something to be able to help them and create a platform to be able to financially assist along that process. That's what we've done. And we got our 501c3. We have charity events and different kind of fundraisers and stuff. We try and do something like every other month to try and really help these patients.
So I know that nonprofits are no joke. You might think that this is something you can do as a hobby, but it's a full-time job trying to run a nonprofit.
Absolutely.
You've talked about, we're doing this, we started this. How did you come across your partners?
So basically, I started off on this as more or less a solo journey. And just kind of through, just our general medical cannabis network just here in Ohio. So I've always kind of kept up the different relationships I had, especially in Michigan and Ohio. I more or less already had kind of like a base network of people that I'd already had been working with, as far as like activism and, just the medical marijuana patients and people that were lobbying and stuff. So I already kind of had a lot of those relationships that I've already kind of had built over the years. But I would say more or less the people that are working with our organization, they each have their own individual passions for this as well, and their own personal stories that they've kind of brought to the table. And so, we're a smaller organization, but we're all volunteer. So everything that we get as far as donation money goes right back to the public as far as helping patients financially afford it, and then our educational programs as well.
So if someone is finding that they're having success with medical cannabis and they cannot afford it and they come to you, how do you provide the checks and balances to make sure that these people are actually people who are in need?
Right. So currently, we're in the process of getting HIPAA certified, which that will then allow us to kind of bring our organization to the next level as far as asking people for, their medical statements, their financials, and just like a lot of the personal information, which we would only ever use to be able to look at and see, okay, do you qualify or not? Up until this point, patients have just been so willing to just kind of share their information. They'll send us the forms and I'll take one look at it and go, no, we definitely need to help you. I'll usually have like an hour-long phone call with them, try and get a feel for who they are, what they've been dealing with, what their qualification is, where they're located. And so then we'll generally send them to one of our partner clinics that we're working with, and then we'll have the fees waived for them when they go in to schedule their appointment.
So without a doubt, somebody listening needs financial assistance in their medical cannabis treatment, and there's someone listening who knows someone who needs the help. Where should they go to find you?
Sure. So you can visit our website, compassionatealternatives.org, and we have kind of just the general process of how you can go about, just using our program. We're currently kind of narrowing down our application process, but I tell patients all the time to just email me or give me a call, and then we've just really been working with patients one-on-one, trying to get them covered. I have a lot of different mentors personally that I've been working with as far as just the larger charities in Ohio, like Columbus Foundation and other different types of organizations like that. And because our nonprofit is so unique in what it's, trying to achieve with helping these patients, there's been a lot of things that we've had to kind of sort out along the way because we are a younger organization. And so obviously the more funding we have, the more donations and just the money that we raise, the more patients we can help.
I certainly hope that someone out there listening right now wants to help as well. So if they wanted to help, would they go to the same website?
Yeah, absolutely.
And is there more things they can do other than just financial contributions, or is that the biggest thing that's needed right now?
I would say definitely financial contributions is the biggest, because the more we raise, the more we can help and the more we can kind of give back in educational programs. We really strive to have all of our programs free and open to the public as well. So that way people aren't worried about having to pay to come to our events and to be able to network and that sort of thing. And so that's one of our goals also, to be able to keep offering those services for our patients. We would need to, obviously raise funding and that sort of thing. So aside from that, volunteer work work. We're always looking for volunteers to kind of help our organization grow. We're really trying to expand like up north and even like down in Southern Ohio. And so really, if you're interested in volunteering, donating, signing up for our newsletter. We also are working on a blog page as well for patients to kind of write blogs in about their own personal stories with medical cannabis. And you can do that all online on our website. It's the last page, I believe, is just the sign up, and you can sign up for any one of those things.
You're looking for volunteers to help expand this program?
Yes, to help expand and just to help with our events that we're already
Okay, so what our listeners are hearing right now is you saying that this is an awesome program that should be expanded, and we need your help to make that happen.
Absolutely.
All right, just want to make sure our listeners get that very clearly.
Yes. Yep.
Because I really believe that this is something that's worthwhile, a cause that's worthwhile, something that should be expanded. There is one question that I didn't quite get to, but I do want to, because I think it's important for all of our listeners to know, and maybe you've already hit it and I just missed it. The percentage of contributions that goes to the actual goal of your nonprofit. Do you have that number that you could give us? I
would say probably 85 to 90% of what we have in goes directly back out to our programs and financial assistance.
If you're listening, you don't know that nonprofits have overhead. Please know that nonprofits have overhead, and it will never be 100% that goes directly to the cause. However,
and mainly that's like, website upkeep and just different, privacy stuff and that sort of thing. It's all just, you need to be able to run a business. But,
absolutely.
Like I said, I'm the CEO and founder of the nonprofit. None of us are drawing a salary from this. So we wanted to make sure that everything just goes right back out to where it's needed, which is our patients.
It's my understanding that this venture of yours, this nonprofit, led you to Terasana. Is that true? Can you tell me how that evolved?
So I had actually met the owners of Terasana probably about 4 months ago, and they had kind of noticed just general work and stuff that we had been doing with our nonprofit, and just really felt like that it would be a good fit to run one of their dispensaries here. And so I'm the general manager of this dispensary here in Columbus, Terasana. And one of the main reasons I took this job was to really, make sure that from, inside of the dispensary that we're really being patient focused and, really providing the patient education that is so desperately needed. When the patients walk in, you have no idea who is going to be walking into your store, somebody that is completely seasoned and they've been a recreational smoker their whole life, or somebody that this is their first time, just trying something new like cannabis. So you really want to be just compassionate and cognizant of the fact that the people that are walking in, they need help. They don't feel good, they've been sick, they're coming here for a solution, and we're providing that solution.
The cannabis industry, it's very interesting to me, the landscape and the personalities that are involved. How have you gleaned through it? Like what has been your process of?
So I'm going to speak just for Ohio specifically right now, because like I said, I do have experience in other states. For Ohio specifically, I think one of the most important things right now is to work together. One of the things we try to provide through Compassion Alternatives is our bi-monthly Canna Network socials that we started about a year ago now. And it kind of started off as just kind of like a fun way to kind of bring the community together. And now these events have grown pretty large over the past year and have really kind of turned in a great community event, and that really brings people together from, you have cultivators and processors, owners of dispensaries, all the way down to the patients. And it is a really great way to bring everybody together, bring the community together specifically, and really make sure that this program runs the way it should and is patient focused and is sustainable, because we want this program to work for everybody involved, especially the patients, more importantly. And, it's important for all of us to work together and make sure that this is going to work. Another thing too that, I at least try to touch on at our events also is to be patient with our program and be thankful that we at least have something up and running for how conservative our state is, and as long as it's taken to kind of get to this point, and kind of just remember that there are a lot of states that have nothing at all still, and you don't have that option at all down there.
No. And it's really hard when you think about people like your friend who passed and that choice of just risk going to jail or shrink your tumors.
Yeah, and that was one of the main things he was worried about. He was like, Emilie, if I, keep doing this and they find out that I'm taking this and I get charged with a felony, then I get jail time, and then I'm basically just rotting in jail, dying either way. Like, it really was like a really hard decision, like rock in a hard place, like the ultimate, because it's like, what do you do at that point? And there are people even now that are struggling with that, just in other states where there isn't even anything. And even now that we do have something here and we do have a program and people do have their card, I'm not going to mention, but there's, a few hospital campuses and just programs and stuff around here that are refusing people because they're medical marijuana patients, or their, health insurance finds out that they're taking medical marijuana. And like, there's weird things going on too now between the hospitals and insurance companies and,
really,
employment and that sort of thing, just because you have your medical marijuana card and it is legal. It's still kind of carrying that silly Schedule 1 is so,
it's just
crazy.
One of the things that I find most frustrating is the fact that the people in charge don't recognize the stories people tell about their successes. They just
right.
But how many of these stories do we have to have over and over and over again before? It's just ridiculous.
No, and exactly. And to your point, one of the most amazing things that I've been to recently was a cannabis science conference, and I was just there in Portland the end of August, and it was even incredible for me and super eye-opening, just the amount of studies and R&D that have kind of come out, like just internationally, and just that side of the coast where, in our side of the coast, we're playing a little bit of catch-up, studies and just kind of really kind of diving into the research and stuff here. But on the West Coast, they've been kind of playing around with it for 10 years now, in some states. And for them, it's kind of more or less like, okay, we have this study, we have this study, we have this study. But I think just because it's kind of not whole, like, it's really interesting. I feel like, the government really kind of looks at our country kind of split at the moment, and it's just because the science isn't unilaterally accepted that might be the reason why they're like, well, we can't take any of this as true evidence or true facts, as true studies, because it's not unilaterally accepted. Because we do have a lot of states that don't have anything, and then we have some states that are rec, and then we have some states that are rec and medical, and then some states that are medical. So it's like, just throw a pin on the map of the country, and you'll
get something different.
And you had something different, right? So, and for me too, like, looking from like the governmental point of view, how it is really interesting to like kind of put yourself, and one of the things I love to do too is kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? So, you've worked in the government for years and years. How do you begin to create a program when you have several different states where their lawmakers, their governors are completely against it? So either you do something like on the state level, like how it's been running, or you do something completely universal and say, all right, it's not a Schedule 1 anymore. Let's at least do that, so that way it's not a felony anymore.
Yeah.
And like, if people get caught, it's just a misdemeanor, or you get fined, or whatever, however that works per state,
Okay, so I was trying to promote my podcast. I started an Instagram account. I was taking close-up pictures of flower, and my wife was afraid that we might get like busted or something because I'm posting pictures of cannabis online. And I'm like, okay, I guess that is a possibility that's still,
Yeah, Instagram has been a little bit more lenient, I would say, as far as social media. I know some of the other platforms are generally more anti, fan leaf and any kind of marijuana flowers. But I do think that Instagram is probably a little bit better, just because you have people from all over the world on Instagram. People travel, and that's really the thing too. It's like, you can post a picture of yourself smoking a joint, and that could easily be in Ohio, or it could be in California, and there's really no way to know, especially, like I said, you pinpoint a state, doesn't matter. I mean, you could be living in any state and you still have you're able to travel. You could have taken that picture in California.
I mean, my only point to that was that I think in my mind I was getting away from the fact that it is still a felony.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like in my mind I was like, I've got my card, I'm okay. But the fact is no, it's still a felony.
It is still a felony, Schedule 1, absolutely.
Are you concerned at all about managing this dispensary? And I mean, I haven't heard of any raids in Ohio.
No, I have
heard of raids.
Yes, and in Colorado, that was a definite fear that we had. We were never raided specifically, but I did know a couple of store owners that did actually get raided during my time out there. But here specifically, I feel 100% comfortable, just working closely with the Ohio Pharmacy Board, the agents, just really making sure that we're right on top of it as far as like our regulations and our laws and, our security. This is probably the safest I feel like I've ever been as far as working in a dispensary itself. So no, I think it's safe to say I feel 100% confident that we're good here.
That's good. That's really good to hear. Great. Emilie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners who are considering cannabis?
I would say, generally be patient with the program here in Ohio. We're working very, very hard to make this program sustainable. As time goes on, the more and more dispensaries open up, the more and more options patients will have to be able to go to the dispensary that is closest to them. And over time also, there'll be more and more product available. Also, visit compassionalternatives.org. We're able to help you with your education, different seminars, educational programs, financial assistance, and if you are interested in volunteering or donating, visit our website. We'll be happy to help you.
Great, Emilie. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Consider Cannabis is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. If you would like to be a guest and share how cannabis has helped your health and wellness, contact us at considercannabisnow.com. If you have found anything of value in this episode, please share it with someone else. Remember to subscribe for free and get every new episode delivered right to your phone. Join me in anything of value in this episode. Please share it with someone else. Remember to subscribe for free and get every new episode delivered right to your phone. Join me next time and we'll consider cannabis together.